Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Film Frauds. Myself, Matt, and my co-host is on his phone, Tyler,
Hello.
providing completely unprofessional, 100% biased opinions on the movies of today, tomorrow, and yesteryear.
You're calling me out. We just talked about this.
Yeah, well, I gotta give the audio listeners, a sense of what's going on, sense of atmosphere.
How dare you?
Tyler is outside under a bridge in
Mhm.
Los Angeles.
Yeah, in my
There's a
natural state.
bunch of homeless people around him asking him
Yeah.
for drugs. Or are you
Yeah.
asking them for drugs?
I'm asking them for drugs. Yeah,
Oh,
I'm horrifically addicted at this point. Just
yes, of
you
course.
can't see my lower half, but I am vibrating on a frequency never before heard to man. So
Mm.
yeah.
But speaking of addictions, we are addicted to finding modern classics of film, of which we search for movies of the 2000s, 2010s, and 2020s, and we discuss whether or not they will be remembered like 100 years from now or whatever in film discourse for the remainder of time we have left, which according to Paul Schrader is not much time left.
Yeah.
Um, and the only reason why I usually let you describe the what the modern classic series is about, but I took the mantle this time because we're starting this episode off with a little reconciliation of Tyler.
Oh no, what happened?
He's seeking forgiveness for his bad Goodfellas takes he had 2 years ago,
I
and
think so.
now
Yeah.
today wants to atone for his sins upon a
Yeah.
rewatch. So Tyler,
Yeah.
because we're doing the Irishman today,
Because
so you
we're doing the
decided
Irishman,
to
by the way. Yeah.
rewatch
Yeah.
some Martin Scorsese films, and one of them happened to be Goodfellas.
Yeah. So I want to throw this out there, some context. 2020, 2021, peak COVID, really bored, had nothing to do. And I was like, this is the time I'm going to finally watch Goodfellas. Everybody was like, this is the greatest movie ever. I was like, absolutely, let's fucking do it. I watched it and was like, all right. Didn't really I was like, it's good. Didn't really click with it. But I on my letterbox and something that is still recently held over
He's like,
me.
this means war.
Yeah, I'm like, it's no Roman J. Israel Esquire. I'm like,
Of
come on.
course.
This Means War is a great movie. Get the fuck out of here. Tom Hardy and Chris Pine, when have they been in a movie? Speaking of Tom Hardy, I saw a trailer for his new movie called Bike Riders.
Yeah.
He's like talking really weird again. I'm like, all right, let's do this. Like, I'm so like,
I just love it when Tom Hardy talks weird.
he's like, it's
Give him all the
incredible.
craziest accents imaginable.
Have you seen the Bike Riders trailer with him in it?
No, I have not.
You just after this we record, you have to listen to him, listen to him for like 5 seconds. You'd be like, this is gonna be the greatest movie ever with him. But I saw Goodfellas and was like, it's a lot. Like, it's a 2 hour and 20-minute movie that literally feels like you snorted cocaine, because that's kind of the point. And then watched like a gangster movie. It's a lot. It's really hectic, and I was overwhelmed and not really sure what to think about it. And I left kind of being like, didn't really like. I liked it. Like, I thought it was really good, but I didn't think it was this magnum opus. And then I recently moved. And in preparation for this, I was like, I'm going to watch Goodfellas. And I watched about 30 minutes at one point, and then I had to move and stuff like that. So after moving, like, we settled in, I put it on my TV, and I basically sat mesmerized for about the remaining 2 hours of the movie. I was wrong. Please forgive me, Matt. I come here as confession, St. Matthew. Please forgive me. I was completely wrong. I am in the cult of Goodfellas now. I get it. I understand it now. It took a couple
Okay.
years and for me to be physically and mentally exhausted. But I now recognize it for how fucking great it is. Do you forgive me?
I forgive you. And you
Yes.
should forgive me for not clearly stating what we're talking about today for this podcast, which is The Irishman, 2019's The Irishman, the most recent Scorsese movie, except for his upcoming Killers
Yeah.
of the Flower Moon. But we want to kick off this discussion of The Irishman by talking about our general thoughts on Martin Scorsese. Do you happen to remember your first Scorsese movie?
Honestly, I think it was probably Shutter Island.
Oh,
Yeah, it's weird because I remember Shutter Island. There was I had a really, I think you know the name of this very old YouTube channel, but let's refrain from saying it because I don't know the login anymore. But
oh,
I was like 15, maybe. I think I just turned 15, 16, heavily inspired by the YouTube film critics. And was like, I'm going to make fucking movie
big
reviews.
money.
I'm going to make that cash on YouTube. Like, 2 people saw it. But when I was collecting DVDs, one of the ones I watched and collected and was a big advocate for when I was younger was Shutter Island. And I was like, this is like the greatest movie I've ever seen. I was like 5-star. And honestly, I remember it very fondly. It's been a couple years since I've seen it. But honestly, probably Shutter Island. And like, even just looking at it, like, I don't really know which one I would have watched. Like, The Departed was probably on in the public, like it was like a thing because we're from Massachusetts. So like the Departed kind of thing. Like that was like a
Departed.
thing. Like I knew about it. It was on TV. Never really watched it. But the Shutter Island, even just looking at his movies right now, I think was definitely, I may have even, when did that come out? I may have seen that in theaters, honestly. Like I think it was Shutter Island. What about for you?
I think The Departed was the first Scorsese movie I've ever seen.
How old were
Uh,
you when it
I
came out? Or how old were you when you watched it, I
I think
should
in
say?
2006. So I did not see it nowhere near did I see it in theaters or anything. I
Yeah.
think I saw it a couple of years after it came out.
Yeah.
I was probably like early teenager, maybe preteen, but I
Mm.
watched like a TV version of it.
So
Like I
heavily
DVR'd it
like,
on FX. So like I didn't
yeah.
watch like the the theatrical version of it. So like
Yeah.
a lot of freaking and like things like that. Like you
Yeah.
freaking idiot.
Yeah.
Not not all the actual swearing that's
Yeah.
in the theatrical version. And I loved the movie. I thought it was amazing, especially because like being so attached to Massachusetts. I
Yeah.
thought it was a really great movie. But interestingly enough, I think Scorsese, as like a filmmaker, I've seen quite a few of his movies.
Yeah.
I really like Scorsese, but he's not one of my favorite filmmakers.
Interesting. I can understand why he's I kind of agree and kind of disagree. Um, but I kind of have a weird like you look at his movies and you're like, I've seen like way more of these than I realize, and you're like kind of like going through them and you're like, I really like a lot of these. A lot of them I don't know how rewatchable they are. I mean, I feel like people would disagree on like Goodfellas and stuff like that, how many times they've probably seen it. But like a movie like Wolf of Wall Street, like okay, so like my experience with like a movie like Wolf of Wall Street is I'm gonna allegedly confess to a crime right now, but I remember it was in theaters. I couldn't see it because I was too young, and I definitely was not going to go with any family because of the heavy, like graphic, like sexual content in it. So I was like, oh, I'll wait for it to illegally be on like Pirates Bay on a torrent. And I remember me and our other friend Mark downloaded it at midnight on a school night. I remember it was like 11:59, and I started it and I finished it in that night. I went to bed at like 3:30, woke up in like 2 hours, and then went to school, having watched like Wolf of Wall Street. And that was like the Wolf of Wall Street Oscars year. That was like a really big deal. But like I watched his movie. I've seen that movie like 4 or 5 times since. Like it's so fascinating. Why isn't he your favorite? Like what about it stands out for you?
So I watched Wolf of Wall Street once, and like I watched it like sophomore year of high school or something.
Yeah.
But that movie like captured the zeitgeist of young boys in high school because
Yeah.
I think it is. I hate like the term dude bro cinema,
Yeah.
but I think like Wolf of Wall Street to me is like the pinnacle of dude bro cinema, where
Yeah.
it's just dudes. It's
It's
just
just it's just
dudes
it's just
making
guys.
money. You can be being misogynistic,
Yeah.
and it's all in the film's lens pretty awesome. And I mean to a certain extent, but I'm obviously exaggerating when I say that.
Yeah.
Um, it never didn't emotionally connect with me when I was younger, and I have not really had too much of an urge to rewatch it. I watched Goodfellas. It's funny. I was also in like early high school. I was at a barbershop, and the scene was on where it's Pesci, and all like the characters all sitting around the bar talking.
Yep.
And I was like,
That's like every scene of the movie.
well, I mean, like the one that like when they're like when, about like the mother, like, oh, I'm a clown, I amuse you. Like that scene
Oh,
was
that
going
like
on.
yeah, that yeah.
Yes, and I was like, I couldn't believe like the dialogue. I was like, this is something else. Like this is
Yeah.
like I've seen The Godfather already, so I thought
Yeah.
like mob movies had to be a little more like I think The Godfather's a better movie than Goodfellas, but I thought like mob movies had to be like slower and more
Yeah.
dramatic. But here it's like it was like cool and stylish. I
Yeah.
was like, whoa, this is cool. So then I finally did watch Goodfellas as well. Scorsese
Scorsese.
is like very long-winded to me.
Okay. How is he long? Is it because he makes longer movies
He
or
makes longer movies, and like for example, I was watching Texas Driver for the first time for our First Reformed review,
yep.
and even that movie's only 2 hours long, but even then, there's just like a lot of just indulgence, just
Mm.
slow, and it's like not
Okay.
always really to build tension, just to be slow, and I didn't
Yeah.
really feel like it needed to be that way, which is
Okay.
going to be complete heresy. Like I understand
Well,
that.
like you like it's taste. I mean, at a certain point, like you are content if a movie's between 90 to 105 minutes, like an hour and a half to an hour 45, you're like, yes. Like long
Yes.
movies are they're some people don't like it's a preference. And like before we were recording this, I was like, you want to go see Killers of the Flower Moon? It's 206 minutes. And you're like, what the fuck? Like, I can't take a break in a theater. Like, it's interesting. So, like, when all of his movies are 2.5 hours plus, I mean, at a certain point, like, you kind of have no way to get into. We'll talk about that with The Irishman when we get into it. But so you even think like The Taxi Driver at like hour 50, 2 hours is like
not even like
too
the
much?
runtime, but just like the filmmaking style is more what is like. It just can be slow sometimes. I just don't. I feel like it's more indulgence than like necessary.
Okay.
But I mean, there's a part I would think I say is my favorite of the movies that I've seen from him. I watched Raging Bull like freshman year of college, so it's been a while, but I didn't remember particularly liking it.
Okay.
I saw it.
Raging Bull is a lot. I saw that in theaters here in LA, and it is a very slow, very tough movie to get through. Content-wise, it's like there's no breaks. People are miserable and angry and violent for like 2 hours. But it kind of ends with like a deep level of like introspection where you're like, man, some people suck. Like,
then
it's
even
just, like,
Silence, like I feel like when I watched Silence, like I didn't get what I really wanted out of Silence in the
we saw
theaters.
that in
Like I thought it was
together,
really
right?
good, but like I've had no urge to rewatch it.
Well, Silence is so more so. I mean, Wolf of Wall Street's 3 hours. Silence is 2.5. Irishman's 3 hours 20. Killers of the Flower Moon's 3 hours 20. I mean, there is definitely a question of like, I mean, he has definitely earned like enough. What's the term? Like carte blanche, I think is the right room where it's like he can make whatever length movie he wants. People are going to show up to it. And especially with like his more like introspective recent, like he had an interview in GQ where he's basically like, I have like no time left. He's like, I'm just trying to make movies and know what's important and live my life until it's over. He's like, I'm old. He's like, I'm going to die. And it's like really like it's a very like morbid, but very like fascinating reflection of like what it is to be old and be a storyteller. And I mean, he kind of hit that like Kurosawa point where he's like, I'm dying and I now just know what I'm capable of.
Yeah.
And it's like a really like you can see that kind of in like we'll talk about it in The Irishman, but it's a very prevalent theme in The Irishman. I for one, like I understand where you're coming from with this. I'm cool with his runtime of movies. They're so like it's so basic just to say they're just all like great movies to me, even if they're not rewatchable. I haven't seen The Silence since theaters. It's not a very easy movie to go back to. But I remember it being really good. Wolf of Wall Street I watched recently, which is probably one of the more like entertaining movies, is 3 hours long. It's a lot. I mean, Shutter Island is 2 hours. I'm gonna rewatch that eventually. I haven't seen like a movie like Hugo. I've never seen. Have you ever seen Hugo? Yeah, I've never seen that. It's really fascinating. I feel like it sounds like I'm kind of dogging him a little bit. I love his movies.
I mean, I do. I mean, when we're talking about The Irishman, you're gonna realize. I mean, the audience will know how I think about The Irishman when we talk about it. But I think like relative to his caliber, of like how well he's regarded in film discourse, I think I'm on like the lower end of Scorsese.
Because I mean, I definitely know like knowing you for this long, kind of know what your tastes are, and it does make sense. Like I don't think I'd ever see you be like, this movie isn't good, but you're just like, I liked it, I didn't love it. Like that seems like a lot of times I've talked with you about these movies, you're like, yeah, it's really good, it's just not for me. Yeah, you like a different type of movie.
So with that said, The Irishman,
2019,
his most recent movie, I think.
Yeah.
Between this movie and Killers of the Flower Moon has been like his longest break between making a film. I
looked that up because Shutter Island came out in 2010. Hugo was 2011. Silence was 2016. There had to be a movie. Oh, no, sorry. Wolf of Wall Street was 2013. Not 2015. I was wrong. Silence was 2016. And then it was Irishman 2019.
Yeah.
Man makes movies. That's a lot of movies. Which
and
is really awesome.
And Irishman was significant for 2019 because it was only on Netflix, exclusively on Netflix.
Yeah.
Which includes like global, because I watched this when I was doing my semester abroad in Dublin. Like came out the same day, like in the US that it did. Like, so this is like all over the world, or at least in the US and in Europe. Like this was a huge deal for Netflix, a huge grab from Netflix because it's a Scorsese movie to 3.5 hours long, reuniting De Niro with Scorsese, reuniting Pacino and De Niro. First time ever Scorsese and Pacino in a movie.
Age of Innocence, I think.
Scorsese directed that movie?
I think so, yeah. Hold on, let me double check because I'm pretty sure. Oh no, that's Daniel Day-Lewis. I'm wrong. Never mind. Yeah, I'm gonna say yes.
And then this movie brought Pesci out of retirement. Joe Pesci out of retirement.
Yeah, and now he's in like a Pete Davidson Hulu show. Did you know that?
No, I did not know that.
It's like Buffkin or whatever. But
Yeah.
also, this movie came out end of November, and then 3 months later we had COVID. And it
Yeah.
weirdly, like, I remember it
They feel
like
so far apart for some
they
reason though.
exactly, but like I feel like this movie kind of got like this movie came out is clearly like a big deal. Like you said, Netflix, like most studios I feel like will be willing to give Martin Scorsese. I mean, that's actually exactly why. I mean, he's doing it on Apple because he's like, I want like $200 million. I looked up the budget for this movie. The budget for this movie was reported to be 159 to $250 million,
Mm.
and nobody would give it to him except for Netflix. So he made it on Netflix. It looks like he probably had no studio interference. Seems like a very personal movie for him. I mean, it came out, we had COVID, and then I kind of just completely forgot about it because COVID was kind of a big deal. Do you remember that time? Like, what was it like? Do you remember like watching it? I mean, you were in Dublin and then you came home.
So I remember watching it like I don't I'm my laptop out. I was like,
Yeah.
I want to like just tackle like some to take a chunk out of the movie out
Yeah.
of it just to watch and then come back to it. I think I watched the whole thing one sitting.
You did? I watched it 2 nights.
Yes.
I was 2 nights.
I think I
Yeah.
watched it all in one sitting. And the thing that I has stuck with me for the past 4 years, because I haven't seen it since
Neither
until
have I.
like last weekend when I rewatched it,
Yep.
is like the last shot of the movie. I think
Yep.
has stuck with me longer than anything else. I remember talking to like when I came back home, I remember talking to like friends and family about it, and it was
Yep.
very controversial. Like my uncle said it was a waste of time, like a waste of 3.5
Really?
hours. Yeah.
Okay.
And I have theories about that. To me, The Irishman represents like the end of the mobster movie.
Yep.
And I think that because I can't think of any other mob movie that tackles like the mobsters dying of old age, like getting old and dying from that. Usually
Yeah.
the mobster movie is about like live fast, die young. Like
Yep.
that's what it is. Like even in The Godfather, like Marlon Brando's character is old, but he's only like in his 50s.
Yeah.
Whereas here in The Irishman, you can see these characters just slowly wither away from
Yeah.
disease and like physical ailments, and
Yep.
it feels like and it's also meta too because Scorsese, De Niro, Pesci, Pacino are all getting old as well.
Yeah.
And especially on a rewatch, like these scenes in the last like 45 minutes of the movie are even more impactful, I would say, in the rewatch, like knowing where it all goes. It is like the because I think Scorsese is partially to blame, like with Goodfellas, of like making the mobster cool. And to me, like The Irishman feels like the apology, like or like, oh, I'm wrong. Like no, like
Yeah.
the
Like,
ones
oh,
that don't get
sorry.
hit, the
Yeah.
ones that don't get hit are the ones that just age very slowly and die. Or it's like you
Yeah.
have like Joe Pesci's character is a psychopath. By the time he's at the end of his life, he can't even eat bread because like
Yeah.
he's so frail.
Yeah. You see that
And
where it's like dipping, he's like, break me a piece, like smaller, smaller, and they're like dipping in grape juice, or that like where it's like a Russell went to the church and then he went to the hospital and then he went to the graveyard, and you're like, whoa. You're like, holy
yes,
shit. Yeah. Um, it's fascinating. It's like everything you said is 100% true. Like even like Goodfellas, like Goodfellas ends with Henry Hill being like, this life is boring. Like, but
yeah,
he's like 30 something in the movie. Like by the time it's over, he's in witness protection. But like you go through like Goodfellas does like talk like and kind of like express like the violence. I mean, when was the last time you watched Goodfellas?
I like mid 2000s, probably 2010s,
Mid
probably.
2010s. Do
Yeah.
you remember like when they kill the guy at the bar where like Pesci kills, like he
Yes.
calls him, he's like, go get your fucking like shoebox or whatever, and he kills him.
Yeah.
It's like that, and then he gets killed. It's like it does talk about like the brutal reality of the violence, but it does, you're right, it does like, wow, look how cool it is. Look how like awesome
Like a
it
De
is. Like,
Niro is like stacking like has a bunny out and it's playing Sunshine of Your Love,
yeah.
like things like that in
Yeah,
the
it's
bar.
cool. It's
It is
suave.
cool.
Yeah.
In this movie, there's nothing cool about this
No.
movie.
It's like even like the filmmaking, it's just like it's so simple. It's like the color palette of the movie is gray. It's like not that expressive. The characters feel like you said, like old and withered and slow. And like
Mm.
the actions and the dialogue and the storylines feel like grounded and realistic. It's like, oh, it's not some like we're going around shaking up like mailman. Like I'm pretty sure that probably did happen, but it's like, oh, we're going to like influence Jimmy Hoffa and like
Yeah.
like it's like these slower, more like methodical ideas of what it's like, what actual corruption, what actual power is. Because the character of Russell, like we don't see really him do like anything in the movie. He just kind of goes place to place and like people like worship him. He solves things with his words, never
The closest you
violence.
get is when he comes home to his wife and his
It's
shirt's all undone. He just has
yeah.
that psycho look in his eyes.
Yeah,
Like
he's like
he
covered
just
in
did something
blood.
that's really messed him up.
Yeah. But
That's the most we got.
it's a fascinating look at like what actual like power is. I mean, there's the Harvey Keitel character, Angelo
Yeah.
Bruno, who you
Yeah.
like literally never see do anything except for sit at a table, and then it's like, oh, he was shot and killed. But it's like the story's telling us like these are the two most powerful people in the city, like outside of like the world, outside of or the world, the U.S., outside of
Mm.
like the president. It's really like that was at least for me. Because you said you only like really recalled like that last shot in the movie. Did you remember like anything else on a rewatch?
I remembered like the Hoffa murder,
I remember that one. Yeah.
assassination.
Yeah.
Yes.
I remember that
Which
one too.
we can probably talk about that later on in the
Yeah.
episode, but that too, again, it's like stripped down. There's nothing. It kind of reflects I mean, spoilers for Goodfellas as well, but it reflects Joe Pesci's death in Goodfellas as well,
Yeah.
where it's just like it's like bam, like it just happens, and
Yeah.
there's nothing stylish about it. It's just like
Yeah.
again, it's like one of those cold reminders. But whereas Goodfellas is like has a coolness to it leading up to it, this
Yeah.
movie doesn't really have as much of it. And I think with regards to like the oldness of this movie being very old,
Yeah. We
like,
should probably
with
we
its
probably talk about that. Yeah.
characters,
More.
I would say just to get like the weakness out of the movie out of the way is the first like 30 minutes. I was like on the rewatch, I was like, oh no. I was a little nervous because the de-aging. So this movie's gimmick in what came in 2010 was like you're gonna see Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci look 40 years younger.
Yeah, they're going
You're
still
gonna be
young.
going back in time. No,
They don't. No, they don't.
Like it looks like they're just wearing makeup. Like it's not like Tarkin bad and like Rogue One.
Oh, that's right. That was
Yeah,
really bad. Yeah.
it just looks like they're wearing makeup, but they have like because I watched Taxi Driver a little while ago, so I know like what young De Niro looks like. And he has like he still has like the facial structure of like an older gentleman.
Yeah, he's
So
thicker. He's a fuller face.
yes,
Yeah.
and same with Pesci, like and they move slow, and it's like
There's that one scene where he beats up the grocery store owner.
yes,
And it's like really like it's kind of bad. Like
for a
it's
3.5 hour long movie, like like I don't want to be like that guy, but it's like it shocked me that this made Final Cut because it does not look good.
That's where I think like he had full like I think Netflix went cool $200 million, whatever you want, do it, like
Yeah.
you're good, like, and I think that's where they gave him like probably full creative control. I don't know about the full process of it, but yeah, that was I kind of wrote down like just digital de-aging. Like I remember this being a big news story. Like it's like Martin Scorsese wants $250 million for Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, Al Pacino movie where he plans to digitally de-age them instead of casting younger actors. And you look at it, it's always been Uncanny Valley. It's always been like I haven't seen a digital like I watched 30 minutes of the new Indiana Jones movie, The Dial of Destiny, and that opening part is Harrison Ford digitally de-aged, and it looks they're getting better, but a part of my brain cannot fully see it and go that looks good. Like a part of me is always like that looks awkward, and when you're in that flashback scenes where you see him like as a truck driver and he's talking with Pesci and you're like something about this is like kind of freaking me out a little. You had the same thing, right?
And even just from like a narrative standpoint, it's like it's hard to tell how old the character's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Like because like the movie starts with Frank Sheeran and Buffalino. What's his first name? Russell Buffalino.
Russell Buffalino.
With driving with their wives to a wedding.
Yeah.
Which ends up being the Lloyd Buffalino's daughter's wedding.
Yeah.
And like, but it's flashing back as well to like when Sheeran first met Russell and first got involved with the mob. And it's like it's so difficult to tell how old people are because then later on during the flashbacks he meets his wife. So you're thinking like, is he like in his 30s? Because he does not look like he's in his 30s.
Yeah, my thought I was kind of operate because like Pesci keeps calling him like your boy, like young man.
Like, come on, kid.
My assumption was they were like early 50s and like early 40s. That was at least like looking at the people. But then
that's what I would think. But like then like they're doing like the christening of the daughter and like all this stuff, and makes you go like, how old are you supposed to be?
Yeah, the ages of it's kind of the thing of like, do you remember Goodfellas? How old Joe Pesci looks in that movie?
Yeah.
So I remember her because I remember watching this with Olive and we were just like, how old is that character supposed to be? Joe Pesci, I think when making Goodfellas, he was like in his mid to late 40s. His character is like 21. And
he plays it well though.
He plays it very well because
Yeah.
he's shorter and he kind of like he's got the more youthful, but it's the same thing of like Martin Scorsese clearly knows what kind of. I mean, he brings these actors back because they were in earlier movies. They're clearly great, and he doesn't like. It doesn't seem like he's like you'll get over it. And I honestly I kind of respect it. I respect his boldness to be like, accept how old these characters are. Does not matter. They're the best actors for this. And you're like, all right, I guess
But
it's a
it's funny
little
because
distracting.
he's so old school that you think like he'd be like the first person to cast younger actors.
Yeah, it's also like it's I don't think it's the point of this movie. I'm gonna
Yeah.
say like I will agree it was distracting, but he's clearly making a point by casting Pesci and De Niro and Pacino in like these like not classic Hollywood stars, but like Hollywood stars
Yeah.
being like this is my swan song movie and I'm getting everybody back regardless.
And so like and it's really only an issue because the flashbacks are only really going on the first like 30 minutes or so,
Yeah.
whereas where you use it, and then Carson movie's 3.5 hours long. So
Yeah.
you still got like 3 hours of amazing content.
Mm-hmm.
And it does start, and I do mean amazing because I think this movie is amazing. And I think the movie really starts to come into its own with the introduction of Al Pacino as Jimmy Hoffa. What do you think about Jimmy Hoffa and Al Pacino in this movie? Because I
love
think it is amazing.
I mean, I love Al Pacino. He's like one of my favorite actors. Heat is one of my favorite movies, as cliche as that is, as being like a guy in his mid-20s where I'm like, Heat's the coolest fucking thing ever. Al Pacino's awesome. Like for me, it's like, oh my God, I forgot he was in this movie. Like it's like, oh, Jimmy Hoffa. I'm like, Jimmy Hoffa. It's really fascinating because just to clarify, and then I want to talk about Pacino. You think this movie's awesome, right? Like
Yes.
you're like all on board. You're like, this is a great movie.
Yes.
I'm lower on you than it than you are.
Okay.
I think for me, it's really messy, but has maybe some of the more powerful, like final 40 to 45 minutes of a movie I think I've ever like watched. To the point like it sent me into like an existential deep introspection where like I was like, I'm gonna call my mom and my family after and say hi. Like the movie ended and I was sitting there, I was like, I'm gonna call my family and say hi, say how's it going.
Get your grape juice in your bread, and you're like,
yeah, it's too big. I have a fucking giant fresh roll of ciabatta bread that I got at like an Italian, not Italian, an Italian like bakery and sandwich shop. But Al Pacino, there's that scene later in the movie where he's like, you fucked with my union. He's like getting mad at them and he's like an old man, but he's still doing the Al Pacino yell. I mean, I love him. He's great in like most things he does. But also it's where the movie gets like really messy for me. Narratively, this movie is all over the place. I think it's one of those movies where it's way too big for its own like narrative thrust. I feel like characters and people and stories are coming in and leaving and going and going.
This movie is very ego driven, both in front of and behind the camera.
Yes, in a
because
good way,
like again, as we said, like young, like old actors being like, I can play a kid.
Yeah,
like,
I got this.
And then Scorsese making a movie that's 3.5 hours long.
Yeah,
and yeah, when you look at a lot of scenes, you're like, this could potentially be trimmed out.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff like for me, a lot of stuff with like I love the actor who does the Crazy Joe guy. But like, there's that point where it's like, what? So it's tough because, poof, poof, poof. Yeah, he's poof, 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 and like he runs out and he like awkwardly kicks. So there's the whole thing. So I'm gonna sound like I'm shitting on this movie a lot, and I'm really not. But like for me, the first 2 hours and 40 minutes, I was like, I don't really know what this is going for. Like it's clearly going for a more gray, realistic breakdown of what it's like to be a gangster, of violence, of power, of threatening, of what it is to be in this world. But it's kind of like narratively scattered a little. And then that final 40 minutes where it's like this deep introspection recontextualizes a lot of the movie. And I'm like, this is awesome. And those last 40 minutes to me absolutely saved, I think, a lot of this movie.
I think it's kind of funny that when we started this conversation, I was one saying I wasn't that big on Scorsese.
Yeah.
And I like movies that are too long.
Yeah.
And then I'll be defending The Irishman in its length now.
Yeah. I'm just like, what the fuck?
Okay, so I should preface by saying that I've read the Irishman book.
You did?
Yeah, I heard you paint houses. I heard you painted houses.
Oh, how was it?
It's really good. It's pretty good. Like I read it like 3 years ago, so it's been a little while, but I liked it. So like I love history as well. So like I loved the war between like the rise of the Kennedys against Hoffa and the unions, and
Yeah.
like their siding with Nixon. And so all that stuff made sense to me. So I understand like you're not as like big into the history side. Like I
Yeah.
understand why it's boring. And I'm not defending like, of course, Crazy Joe can be cut out. Of course, like the feud between the Hoffas and the Kennedys could probably have been shortened and all this stuff. And like him going to prison and then him having that feud with that other guy who is he's Jewish, and then like
Oh my
right, and that's
God. Joe, not Joe, Pro. Sure, I think he's just called Pro. I feel like at a certain point.
yeah, so
Jimmy
like
Pro,
all that
whatever.
stuff isn't necessarily needed, but at the same time, like I
Tony Pro.
loved the sense of world building. Like I think it takes a really complex time in American history and
Yep.
like does manage to give you like a pretty good idea of what's going on, at least in the union war between unions and government, and
Yeah.
like the kind of significance a guy like Jimmy Hoffa has, and the kind of significance like the mob had at the time as well,
Yeah.
like playing a role in elections and stuff, and how Hoffa helps the Kennedys with their rise. And once JFK got into presidency, that's when they start to feud. And it's like, yes, it can be taken out, but at the same time, I was able to watch this at home. I was able
Mhm.
to pause it like with halfway through and run a couple errands and come back and refresh
Yeah.
my brain. So like at the same time, I'm like, I kind of appreciate certain things. I'm like,
Okay.
this movie like had a theatrical release, it would probably have been shortened to 2.5 hours at the time.
Yeah, at least because Oppenheimer, I'm thinking of like movies that came out recently. Killers of the Flower
Yeah.
Moon, the one that's coming out is 320, but like a movie like Oppenheimer is 3 hours. Like you
Mm,
may have been cut by 30, but no, keep I was just thinking
yeah.
about that. Yeah.
I just loved the world building here and like just how the history plays out, and like these characters literally had a huge impact
Yeah.
on the tumultuous relationship between workers and businesses, between workers and
Yep.
government. And I think a lot of that is captured brilliantly. As for Al Pacino, I think him and Joe Pesci are the for from narrative standpoint are like the two most interesting characters.
Yeah.
Hoffa is the heart, and Buffalino is the heartless.
Yeah.
And it's, even though like it's kind of funny that Scorsese is considered like doesn't like roller coasters, like he calls Marvel movies roller coasters. This movie is very ostentatious, it's long, and it's very dramatic. Like I don't
Yeah.
understand why this is not like technically like a lesser roller coaster, because it is very flashy, it's very long,
Yeah.
lots of stars in it, lots of dramatic scenes in it.
Yeah.
It is it's in a sense it is a roller coaster, but this the quieter moments, especially with Peggy, the daughter's relationship with both Buffalino
Yeah.
and Hoffa, like the contrast of how like she just wants nothing to do with Buffalino
Yeah. She
and like
knows like
just
she's
loves Hoffa. Like
yeah.
that stuff to me would not be as impactful if the movie was not its length, because it's like all of Hoffa and Peggy's relationship plays out like in the background.
Yeah.
Like you see them dancing, you see him buy her ice cream, little small scenes, but there's so many of them played out throughout the course of the 3.5 hour long movie
Yeah.
that like when the dramatic scenes happen and when relationships change for the worse,
Mhm.
you understand it, because in a way, our lack of understanding of her relationship with Jimmy Hoffa reflects the father Frank's lack of relationship with her daughter, because
Yeah.
he's on the outside looking just as we are, because the
Yeah.
movie for the most part takes his we're basically in his shoes. We mostly follow him.
Is Peggy is the only time her character smiles in the movie is when she's with Hoffa? I think it is.
Yes,
Yeah, I think
yeah,
the only time she's any level of expressiveness is when she's with Jimmy Hoffa.
and she has no like soliloquy or dramatic moment. It's like all mainly told in the background. And
Does she
again, like
say
this movie,
anything in the movie except for
yeah, like a couple times she
why didn't
talks
you
to the
call?
dad.
Yeah, why
Yeah,
didn't you call was like the big thing, and then she never talks to them again.
yeah,
Um,
and it's like this movie wasn't its length. Like they probably would have had to like they probably would have had to need a scene where they're like where she like does her dramatic moments like the
yeah,
audience knows. But because the movie it's so long and you get so many scenes between Frank and Jimmy both like in their careers, in their personal lives,
yeah.
like I just really thought it built everything up in such a natural way.
I can completely understand where you're coming from, and I think I do agree with you more once we get to the. And we're gonna spoil the shit out of The Irishman. Clearly, it's based on
Yeah,
a real, like it's real. Like this stuff happened to people. Jimmy Hoffa was a real person who really disappeared at a certain point, and we don't know what happened to him. But it's kind of like the thing where it's like Scorsese's being like, this happened, and like it's like how JFK they kind of say was like the mob got JFK elected and the mob killed JFK,
yeah,
even though it's not technically confirmed. It's more of a theory based speculation, allegedly. I do agree with where you're coming from. I feel that more with the scene basically post Jimmy Hoffa's death to the end, I feel the strengths of the movie excel with the lengths of the movie, because that long drawn out sequence where Jimmy Hoffa is
Yes.
gonna die, and it's just quiet, but you have two characters arguing.
You
He's
got
like,
a
"What?
fish?
You got a fish? What
Yeah,
fish
like they
is
talk
it?
about
I
the
don't
fish
fucking."
forever, and you're like,
Yeah,
just you're like, ah.
yeah, but it's that like it's like that building of tension where there's only one outcome. He's gonna kill him. He's gonna die, even if you don't know the story of Jimmy Hoffa. You know that Frank is this person. This is a story about a man ruining the lives of every single person around him until he has absolutely nothing left, and he's old and gray and has nothing. He's literally living through black and white photos. And that's when I'm like, I'm glad I had the 2.5 hours to get to this, because you feel like there's that scene when Hoffa like looks at Frank in the car. He's like unsure. He's like, why are you 40 minutes late? And he sees Frank back there and he's like, I'm safe with you.
Yeah,
He
he knows.
trusts him. Yeah, he
Yeah.
hugs him. And you're like, what the fuck? It's so impactful. And the fact that he gets in the house, he's like, Frank, let's get out of here. And then like it's great. And it's truly where I completely can agree with this, but also where I think like there's a lot of scenes of like Frank becoming the Union representative, which is
Yeah.
arguably, I think there's a scene at the end where Frank is rewarded for his like actions, and
Yeah, he has like the big
the
ceremony,
ceremony, and
which is
that was
also where Buffalino tells him that Hoffa's on the
yeah.
chopping block.
He inducts him into like he's untouchable. He's like one of the top, which is a thing that we almost see in Goodfellas, and we don't actually see it. Where I'm like, you went more tell than show. For a movie that's almost 3 hours long, I feel like there wasn't enough exploring the impact of Frank, because Frank is a very I mean, again, a lot of this is the point. Frank's a very like reactionary character. He doesn't have a lot of like drive. He's morally kind of gray and narratively kind of gray. He's more of like someone who's pushed with the waves than like actually anything else. And you can see that. We'll talk about the ending where he's like, do you regret anything? He's like, no, it is what it is. Water under the bridge. And it's like really kind of interesting stuff. But those kind of scenes where the movie is like telling us things are really important. Like, wow, Frank is so loved. I was like, is he? Like the movie
That's so
never...
funny because I thought the scene, like, so I didn't think that the whole point of the ceremony scene was for the audience to be told like, oh, he's loved. I thought the point significance of that scene was like during the peak of his success as a career is also like on the personal level where he makes that failed decision to fully commit to the mob and
That makes
loses
sense.
humanity.
Yeah.
Because I think Robert De Niro is like fine in the movie. I think he's
Yeah.
pretty good
He's like the weakest part.
until the second half of the movie where he's has this dilemma of like, do I betray Jimmy Hoffa and stay loyal to the mob? Like when he like those scenes where Jimmy Hoffa, especially during the ceremony, where he like refuses to compromise and he's like, it is what it is. Just do it. Just go and meet with them. It is like you can't do anything about it. He goes, no, I'm not. I'm gonna. He's like, no, they don't know me. They don't know who they're messing with.
Yeah.
And you feel that pain in him. And then same like when he meets Jimmy Hoffa in the car before he goes and shoots him. Like part of what makes him so impactful is like you just see Frank in the background just like trying to suppress the pain.
Yeah, killing it down, like pure typical like masculine like like it's the like exemplary behavior of like what like that generation of men did at that time is they went to war, they suppressed it all down, they suppress, and then they died.
So to me, like I loved the Frank ceremony scene because like that's what like when all the dominoes start to fall and you get that awesome scene between Buffalino and Hoffa.
Yeah,
like they're just like the unstoppable force, the immovable object colliding.
Yeah,
and you get the scene where Hoffa dances with Peggy and Peggy starts to become aware that things aren't going to go well. And it's like, it's like, again, if the movie wasn't as long as it is, none of this stuff that happens would be as impactful to me, at least. And I do agree, like, there are like some stuff like with the union, and that's not necessarily like, it feels like Jimmy Hoffa's in prison forever. And this doesn't really need to be that long because again, like the conflict he has with that pro guy does lead to his downfall. Tony Pro, but also at the same time, it is very stretched out, and they have scenes of like it's like, no, 10 minutes is too long, 15 minutes, like it's like
they have that scene where he's like, you motherfucker, and they fight like 2 times and you're like, okay. It's
like funny, but it's not necessary.
It's good. Like my thing is like I completely agree with everything you're saying. Like thematically, narratively, that scene kind of fits. To me, it's a lot of like there's a lot of like exemplary and like great Scorsese writing, especially in that confrontation between Pacino and Tony Pro, where he's like, "You apologize for being like 15 minutes late. Like what? Like you wear this to a me." Like it's like great stuff in that. I think as a cohesive movie, it falters until the end. And it's once you get to the end that you kind of like, at least in my opinion, you see the at least where it like begins to connect in the point of the movie. But I think we said this before. Like I paused the movie like an hour and a half in, and I was like, what is this? Like, where is this gonna go? Like, I didn't remember anything in the middle, like anything at all. And I think there's a lot that, like, when I say it like could be cut, like I don't want it to be cut. Like I don't dislike this movie, but I do see what you mean though. Like the buildup of like Pacino at the end, especially when De Niro goes like, "Hey, he wants me to tell you like it is what it is," and he like Pacino has, I think, the best line delivery in the movie where he like scoffs and is like horrified, but also kind of like indignant, like they wouldn't dare. Like he's like really like they wouldn't kill me. Like I'm Jimmy Hoffa, and I think that is the reward of the length of the movie. I can concede that. I think you're right on that.
And then just before we get to talking about like the ending, I
Yeah.
will agree. Like there's a couple like hits that they do that are like, especially like with Sally Bug Eyes being killed and everything, where it's
Yeah.
like we already know that Frank has already once he kills Hoff, he's too far gone. Like that's the end. Like
Yeah.
that's when he's fully committed to the mob. He's no longer like any heart he could have is gone. But then you have this scene where he goes and kills Sally. He goes, "Oh, it was a bad hit. It wasn't actually what it's supposed to be, but it is what it is." It's like, yeah, we already know that you're at this point you're fully loyal to the mob. And like that other guy where when he blows up the like the washing machine place,
Oh yeah, and he's
and it's
like,
like, and then he gets in the fight with the mob boss leader. He goes, "That was my place," and he goes, "Oh,
yeah.
I'm sorry." Like things like that, I agree, are not necessary. But as for like the whole Hoffa, anything related to Hoffa, I'm like determined needs to stay in there.
You're in. You're in. You're
Yeah.
all in on Hoffa. You're all in Pacino. Is this one of your favorite things you've ever seen Al Pacino in?
Yes. So I was surprised by how much of a performance he actually gives, because I think
Yeah.
now like 2000s and on Pacino is like, even though he's good at playing Pacino, like he's still like a Pacino. Like I remember watching Dog Day Afternoon, I'm like, whoa, he's playing a character like that's not like screaming all the time.
Yeah,
And
because
here,
you like Heat, right? Like, what
oh
do you
yeah,
think of him in
so
Heat? Yeah.
I like him. He's playing Pacino. Like this, that's the example of him playing Pacino with, but also it being really impactful. Like
Yeah.
it's fun and it's really good. Here, he like balances out between playing a character and then going Pacino like every once in a while. Like it's very strategically done. Like
Yeah.
when he first calls, he's doing his little like Milwaukee accent or whatever. I'm like, whoa, he's like playing a character. Like
Yeah.
he's not like immediately screaming. But then like when he's on trial and the guy tries the fellow assassination attempt, and he goes when he's got a gun, you're charging him. When he's got a knife, you're on your way. Like things like that. Like when he's going full Pacino,
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
here we
You're back
go.
in. This is great.
I think he gives one of the best performances of 2019. I'd be interested in
Damn.
seeing if he got nominated for.
I can look that up for supporting. I can see the Irishman Oscar nominations, but I do agree. It is we have to talk. We'll talk eventually about like the swan song nature of this, but it does feel like the fact that like a character like Joe Pesci came out of just retirement, and I know probably a lot of people who are more like privy to film will probably know why he stopped. I have no idea why he stopped making movies, but he was like a big fucking like
Yeah,
actor. He was huge.
My
He was
Cousin
massive.
Vinny,
Yeah, that's like a
Goodfellas, yeah,
those are big fucking movies, and the fact
Home
that they
Alone, yeah, he's in all that stuff.
Pesci and Pacino were nominated for supporting actor.
Okay,
So these are the just real quick. I can read it. Best Picture, Best Supporting Actor for Pesci, Best Supporting Actor for Pacino, Director, Adapted Screenplay, Cinematography, Visual Effects, Editing, Production Design, Costume Design, and
okay.
it was the nominee and it won, lost all of them, did not win a single nomination.
Who won Best Supporting Actor that year?
That was Brad Pitt, Once Upon a Time in
Okay,
Hollywood, which I mean, kind of hard to
I might have to
go get.
fight Brad
You
Pitt
might have
on
to
that.
fight that. Interesting.
Yes.
I
I
really
mean,
think,
Brad Pitt. I think in I probably said in the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood review we
yeah,
did like yeah, Brad Pitt definitely deserved the Best Supporting Actor. Now rewatching this, even like Pacino, like he's very bombastic in scenes, but there's a subtlety in this movie that he does, like
yeah,
when he's dancing with Peggy and stuff, and it's like he knows what he has to do. He knows he has
yeah,
to tug on the audience's heartstrings, and he does that perfectly.
yeah,
And the last again, his last couple scenes, especially was in the car and when he goes into the house. There's like you can so many ways you can interpret. Like does he notice? Like does he think? Is there any suspicion in his mind that Frank is there to shoot him.
Nope,
You
because
don't think so?
that's where this is where I'm like, this he's incredible in it, because you see, because they build up a lot of don't fuck with them basically, and like don't be late. And these like character traits are like continue throughout, and he's like, the end of the movie, they're so late. He's not even mad. He's just like, what the fuck? He's like so like confused. And he's like, what's going on? Why are you here? Who are you? What is it? And he sees Frank, and you can see like the safety on his face. Like he's like, Frank, like my friend, like what are you doing here? That's where I completely agree that it is some of the like best Pacino performances. Where
it's great because I didn't even think of Heat once watching this movie.
Neither did
like
I.
That's how great I think both characters are. Like I didn't even think of like their relationship in Heat, because which is so iconic at this point. Like here they're completely different characters.
Yeah, it's honestly, I will like the De Niro was definitely tough to like see around, where you're like, that's Robert De Niro probably giving the last great performance until Killers of the Flower Moon. We probably see him in that. But Pacino and Pesci, I completely forgot they were Pacino and Pesci. And I think that's an ultimate like commending. And I like, you're right. Pacino's the best at like these outbursts. Now, nobody beats Pacino when he's yelling, and you're like, yeah, he's the best at this. The scene, the examination of his character of being like this corrupt, essentially, but like sort of good.
He's racist. He's like, he's corrupt.
Yeah.
He just hates, like, he has attitude issues, anger management problems. But at the same time,
he's deeply like he's a charismatic, like loving, like caring. Like you clearly, once you breach that inner circle, which Peggy do, you see that different side of it, which is why Pacino's probably the best person. And honestly,
you have to think like, is his environment why he's being evil? Like Buffalino seems like he's a inherently evil person.
Yeah,
and you have to wonder, like, is it like the environment that's making Hoffa act the way he acts, and it's Peggy, like when he doesn't have to put on that facade anymore, and that's why Peggy's able to see the good in him, because there is a good deep down inside, like the Hoffa persona.
Yeah, is he? And this is ultimately the question of like, I don't know too much about Jimmy Hoffa, and honestly, Scorsese even kind of makes a point at the end of the movie, being like, our generation who has no idea who the fuck Jimmy Hoffa is, because you have that scene where it's like, outside of the president, Jimmy Hoffa was probably the most popular or the second most powerful man in the entire country. And I started this movie and I went, I don't know who Jimmy Hoffa is. And they make a thing at the end with the
nurse.
The nurse who's like, you know who this is? She's like, no, why would I know who that guy is? And you're like, wow, that's pretty interesting, because that actually does reflect. And you can tell that is someone Martin Scorsese grew up being like, that Jimmy Hoffa is a big, important guy in my life. Or like in the culture when he was growing up and stuff. But I do agree that this is Pacino's, it's like weirdly Pacino's movie. And like he comes in, he's the moral, like oddly moral center of the movie, more than Frank, who's having his morally gray. In that scene where he's killed, where he just like kind of makes a noise and then that's
he like sighs, and it's it's
like legitimately rough, because he almost gets to the door too.
And
it's just like, it's really fascinating. It's a really interesting, like, I want Pacino to do more of this like reflective older movies, but I don't know if he will. I don't know what he's doing now.
No. So do you want to talk about the end?
We got to talk about, so Hoffa is killed.
Yeah.
And then we kind of like zoom through, because my assumption is Frank kills Hoffa when he's in his 50s, mid 50s, probably. That's kind of my theory. And then you kind of, after Hoffa's killed, the dominoes fall, like you said earlier, and they arrest and basically put in jail a lot of the people. They're either killed, or then put in jail and they die of old age, or like the Ray Romano scene where he's like, talk to my lawyer. And he's like, your lawyer's dead.
Yeah.
He's like, he has cancer. He died. And he's like, oh.
He's like, who got him? Cancer.
Yeah, cancer. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What did you think of the final? Let's go 40 minutes, I think is how long the final like section is, where it's like pure like old age introspection.
It's brutal, and also made more brutal by the fact that like the actors and director were all friends as well.
Yeah.
Starting from Taxi Driver, and like it has that meta element to it as well, where it's like, yeah, we're all getting older.
Yeah.
And also like just like the scene where he tries to talk to Peggy, and he has his like little crutches on, and like this guy like 30 minutes ago was like drinking champagne with like the most powerful men in
Yeah,
the
on
US.
top of the world.
Yes. And it's also like a weird deconstruction of like masculinity too. Because it's like
Mhm.
he's like, I just wanted to protect you. And like when the other daughter was like, we were literally had to live in fear constantly because of what you're doing.
Yeah,
He just didn't care.
Yeah,
Like he wanted to be loyal to the mob, and then he found other ways to justify it, which is ultimately like his flaw.
yeah. I
Um,
like that idea of like he's like I just wanted to keep you guys safe and protected. It's like we couldn't go to you with any issues because if we went to you with any issues, we don't know what you would have done to the people. That's not
yeah.
protection. It's like fear and like threatening violence. It's it's pretty like I know there's like movies are like a they're a visual and written medium into like the thoughts and ideologies and feelings of a director and actor and stuff like that, but it's been a while since I've seen like a it felt like at times like a pure one-to-one this is what the director is thinking, especially musings about like is there an afterlife, is there god, like well like what is post, like why do people go to religion, like it's like there are lines when I'm like it feels like you took this exactly out of your own like fears and worries and
Because I
like
was watching the Big Picture shows podcast on Scorsese, like was at the gym this morning. I was listening
yeah
to it. And like they're bringing up the point where it's like, yeah, like late into his career, Scorsese makes Silence, which is a religious introspective
yeah
film. And so again, it's interesting. You feel like these are things that Scorsese is also dealing with that like it's like or old people in general
yeah
deal with. It's like when you're a little kid, it's like you're born to most people are born to a church of some sort, and then like
yeah
maybe when you get
especially
older,
back when
you
this movie was coming out,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, oh
religious
yeah.
are
And
more
then maybe when you
popular.
get older, you're like when you're young, you're like okay, like whatever. But when you get older, like I don't know, my mind, I'm not an old man yet, even though sometimes I feel like it. But but like I don't know, maybe when I'm older, like I'll discover another truth that I didn't know when I'm 26,
I mean
things
that's
like
the
that.
hope, yeah, you age and you
Um,
learn new things, yeah.
but also at the same time, like, is Frank genuine with this, or is he like, I've done so many crappy things in my life, like, am I? Because it was that whole thing about like he didn't want to be cremated or buried because of like the permanence of it. Whereas if you're put into like one of those vaults, it's like
Yeah,
he's like it's not as permanent. Like
yeah,
you can tell in the performance, like it's just like there's no real thought to it. Just like
yeah,
it's like death is death. It doesn't matter what happens to your body. It's like the same thing happens regardless if
yeah,
you're cremated or buried or put into a vault or whatever.
yeah,
And so like there's this feeling where like he wants more time to potentially like reconcile,
yeah, we'll
but it's
never
like
get it.
no, this man's alone.
Yeah,
He's burned every bridge
he's
except
killed or
yeah.
isolated or like any friend, any potential person is either dead, suffering the consequences, or completely alienated.
And that's like what separates it from like because I remember you were saying earlier about Goodfellas showing the horrors of like of being in the mob.
Yeah,
Like I think there's a difference between like you like because like martyrdom is a huge thing where it's like when someone's assassinated like in a mob movie where it's like there's like a even though it's brutal, like there's still like a coolness to it, where it's like, oh, he went out like on his own terms or whatever sort of
yeah,
thing. But like here, it's like just watching these people like rot basically and just
yeah,
have everything taken away from them.
yeah.
It's a different kind of losing.
There is
It's
nothing I think more impactful sometimes than you're watching like the character of Russell, how he's like clearly like super powerful, manipulating the like the strings. Everybody worships him and respects him. One of the last few times we see him, he's struggling to eat bread, and he's like excited because he threw a ball. And
yeah,
it is some of the more like Scorsese. It's Pesci clearly and De Niro clearly like these people are older. They're older people reflecting on their life and their art and their own like ideologies. And you can feel that so tangibly in the performances and what the little things Scorsese chooses to do, how De Niro just slowly gets a little slower. He falls in the bathroom. He's in an assisted facility. His pictures are old, black and white. They're old. They're dilapidated. He doesn't have any new memories past that point. He talks
yeah,
with his daughter, and you're like, I forgot you had a daughter. He's like, I had 4 daughters, and you did? Like, it's
yeah,
almost to the point, like, it's the movie does a great job of showing the indifference that Frank has to the other things in his life. The fact that it's like, oh, that's his daughter. I'm like, I forgot he had daughters. Like, I forgot he had kids outside of Peggy. Um, it's super like it's like very unsettling in the best way. It
yeah,
really like it captures this so poignantly that it's impossible to leave this movie without completely understanding that the entire point of every 2 hours and 45 minutes before was to get to this point where you're right, the deeply loyal ties, the
And it feels
deep
like his
alienation.
career has been building up to this point as
Yeah,
well.
exactly.
Scorsese's
Like
career. Yeah.
I haven't seen, I will admit my blind spots are Mean Street and Casino. I own
Oh, I've seen
Casino.
Casino.
You've seen
I've not
Casino?
seen Main Street. Yeah.
Do you like Casino? What's up with Casino
It's been
for you?
it's been a long time. I
Yeah.
remember liking it though.
Okay. Because it's like Mean Streets is a mob movie, Goodfellas is a
It's
mob
also like
movie.
a mob movie kind of
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
So it also feels like, and we're gonna talk about modern classics soon, probably with this.
Yeah.
But it does feel like a director looking back at the movies that made him popular and like kind of like deeply regretting it. Like clearly like proud of what he's done, but also being like the wrong things were taken from these movies, which is an issue like you see with Wolf
Taxi
of Wall
Driver.
Street, Taxi Driver, Wolf of Wall
Wolf of
Street
Wall
too.
Street. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's like the fact that like
Fight Club.
Fight Club wasn't Scorsese.
No, but I'm just saying like a movie that people get the wrong message out of it.
Yeah.
Like Tyler Durden is the hero. It's like
Yeah,
what?
exactly. Yeah, no, and the fact that like Leonardo DiCaprio is still like pretty much like I'm pretty sure it's like like you're not supposed to like understand this, and it feels like Goodfellas in Wolf of Wall Street are, I mean, they're kind of like, this is a Wolf of Wall Street. Wolf of Wall Street is this like decades like the Goodfellas. It's very like similar to Goodfellas in a lot of regards, but Wolf of Wall Street has a more like poignant like it's none of this is good. None of this. And it feels like it's Scorsese like tackling or like internally battling with this idea of like we have to make sure these characters who are not good people suffer the consequences and like understand the serious nature of their own actions and the own way they alienate people happens more concretely in the Wolf of Wall Street, and it's literally the main thematic moment of The Irishman. It does feel like it's this build up, and you're right, he's tackling this like deep religious like philosophical ideology sense of is there
But even
God?
in like a Goodfellas Wolf of Wall Street, it's like four fifths like this is awesome, then like 1/5 like consequences. Here it's 45 minutes of slow degeneration.
Yeah, death. And it's like and he completely like he minimizes, he has like a lot of the same like musical styles, like these like random like
the soundtrack of the movie is absolutely killer.
It's awesome. It's baller. It's so good. But you're like everything kind of stripped down, like the chaotic nature of the directing. I mean, there's that one like tracking shot where that person is killed in the barbershop where you follow those two people in or out, and then you like two people come up and the camera just kind of like circles back. It's like the flair is there, but it's completely like dulled down for a purpose, which I really fucked with. I really, really liked.
So is The Irishman a modern classic?
So this is like the most interesting thing because we have to look at, I feel like, his movies that have come out recently. Shutter Island, Hugo, Wolf of Wall Street, Silence, The Irishman. 5 movies since 2010.
Wolf of Wall Street, like from recognition alone, Wolf of Wall Street is 2 miles ahead of number 2.
Yes. It's I mean, Hugo, no. Shutter Island, no. The Silence, no. But I wonder if that will be a movie that ages well. Wolf of Wall Street is arguably the more popular out of the 5.
There's no argument. Like what do you mean arguably?
Okay, that's fair. It is, if we were to argue pure modern classic, it's the Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah, but if we're arguing pure like what movie will be most known, it is absolutely Wolf of Wall Street.
100%. It's been completely absorbed by finance, internet culture, by film bro culture, by like it's a weird staple of the 2010s, like inescapable.
Yeah,
people remember that movie more than it feels like a lot of other movies. I want to ask your opinion on this before I give mine. Do you think this is a modern classic? You have to tell me now.
So this has been stringing my head for a long time.
Yeah.
And like we said with First Reform, I think is probably like the second best movie we've talked about on Film Frauds so far in this Resurrect in our second iteration.
Yep.
But I don't see any legacy for the movie, so I did not give it a modern classic. We need to clarify that the modern classic is not like a grade based on like subjectivity. Like subjectivity plays a role in how we do this, but we're also looking at like its legacy. And I think a way to look at one's legacy, for Tarantino is like he has 9 movies. Like so when you want for generations to come, people are gonna want to watch Tarantino movies. They're gonna have 9 clear movies to look at. And the reason why I gave Once Upon a Time in Hollywood modern classic is because it is just one of 9 movies, and it's impossible So like, it's gonna be pretty easy to find. Scorsese is different, where he makes a movie every like 3 years. So
Yeah.
his film catalog is a lot bigger. And so things are gonna get lost in the shuffle. And because of the Wolf of Wall Street's success, and because no one really talks about The Irishman, I'm not convinced that this movie will be remembered very. It'll be remembered well by people who watch it, but I don't think it's going to be like a standout. Like if I'm my age 30 years from now, just getting into movies, like if I'm looking at his 2010 movies,
Yep.
like I'm looking at Wolf of Wall Street.
Okay.
I'm probably.
This
So
is
I'm
now
not convinced that this movie is a modern classic, but
we
I'm
are
willing to be convinced if you have evidence to suggest it. Which
we
I
are
think The Irishman is better than the Wolf of Wall Street, just to clarify. So
interesting.
I'm not
Okay.
being subjective. I'm not being subjective.
Okay. Interesting. We have now officially reached our first disagreement with
Oh,
selecting this. I don't want to be like morbid. Martin Scorsese is old. he's he's very transparent with like I maybe got like a movie or two left in me, and then that's it. I'm done. He is how old is Martin Scorsese? I just want to check before I answer
83.
this. He's 83. Martin, this is gonna I really like I don't want to sound super morbid, but Martin Scorsese is an older man at this point, and he's 80. So my whole thing is I am lower on this movie than you are. I think clearly. I think it has thematic points to its stuff. It's kind of one of those things like the movie has intention, but I don't know if it necessarily is executed as well as I want it to. And I understand it. I understand why the things are there. I completely agree with you with a lot of like the behind the scenes. The Pacino is like the heart and soul of this movie to me. 100% agree with me on you. I think you're right about the that final scene with De Niro. The reason that it's like it's the start of the dominoes falling. I don't know if it all works for me in 100%. I think this is like bar none like a modern classic. I think this is a movie that when we examine who Martin Scorsese is as a director, when he inevitably does pass away, like it's a thing. We have to be transparent about it. When we look back, I think this is going to be one of those movies because Mean Streets is getting a Criterion release. Goodfellas is a classic. Casino is like a more internet, like kind of if out of the couple, it's probably one of the lesser knowns. When we look back at like Scorsese and his movies, we're gonna look back at Goodfellas as like number one. And I think there will come a time when we look back at a movie like The Irishman, where it's clearly a director reconciling with his own work and his own art at a level that is utterly fascinating. I think it's a movie that, like, when we think about Scorsese and his type of movies, we think he's the gangster mob movie guy. And I think this movie will slowly build as he's the gangster mob movie guy, but also the guy who clearly did not want to be known as that at the end, who clearly had an idea of what it was like to be known for these type of movies and to reconcile with the idea that maybe he didn't like want the audience to take things this way. And I think those, to me, like The Irishman is 2.5 hours of a really good movie and 40 minutes of some of the more moving pieces of art I've seen in a long time. Or it's a really good messy movie with the 40 minutes of some of the most moving pieces of art I've seen. And honestly, I probably am 100% biased on this. Those last 40 minutes of an artist clearly reconciling with his life and his work and combining that with like clear love and passion, I think is just incredible. And I think when we think about Martin Scorsese, I think this will be the movie that we start to tie to a lot of his identity. I don't know if I convinced you on that. I do think this is a modern
So I
classic.
was thinking a lot about like if like hypothetically, like I think this movie like from a legacy standpoint does serve as like the punctuation of Scorsese as like a mobster filmmaker. So I completely agree with that. It's just a matter of like I don't think anyone was elevated by this movie. I think
Okay.
everyone was already a star. But this movie didn't really do anything to like this didn't like start like a renaissance of Pacino's career or of De Niro's career, or Pesci's career. They just continue to prove that they're amazing,
Okay.
stars. And Scorsese, this movie came out and then it took him 5 years to finance his next movie.
It didn't take, it was COVID, remember? It was
Oh
like, it was the
yeah,
COVID
okay,
stuff.
true.
Yeah. So
No, you're
I,
right there.
I mean,
You
like,
are convincing me. I just think like
you're Wolf of Wall Street.
I just see Wolf of Wall Street there, and I'm like, people are only going to care about that movie.
Okay. So we're
That's my
completely
only
like,
issue. I think this movie, if people do recognize it for what it is, then yes, modern classic. I just think because of his film catalog,
mhm.
like his vast film catalog, I just don't quite see it sticking out among the more well-known stuff.
So your argument is, so if Wolf of Wall Street didn't exist, you're like, this is the movie. But because Wolf of Wall Street, but like even like Wolf of Wall Street,
If Wall Street didn't exist and it got like, because like I'm just thinking of like friends and family who saw the Irishman or like didn't get it, or like it was boring, like it was a waste of time. Like I'm kind of thinking of that as well. Yeah, like which is fine because I'm higher on this movie than you are. So
yeah.
I am like, you're convincing me to say it's a modern classic at the same time.
You're convincing me to not say it is, because it's really hard to argue against the Wolf of Wall Street like argument, where Wolf of Wall Street is a movie that if you ask, I think, because we're Gen Z, we're the back half of Gen Z technically, late 90s born, mid to late 90s born or whatever. Most people our generation have seen or know what the Wolf of Wall Street is. If you go Jordan Belfort,
everyone in high school knew, like when we were in high school, everyone had seen the Wolf of Wall Street.
There's that song, the Jordan Belfort song, that people know from the Wall Street, that was popularized because of it. Jordan Belfort is a person who weirdly pops up on the YouTube shorts in like social media feed as
there are
like,
memes, like Wolf of Wall Street memes. Like no one wants to meme a bunch of old men in a room.
It's weird. So basically we're arguing for like, which I guess is like, we're arguing for culture movie versus director ideology movie, really. And it's the culture movie's gonna win, and it's kind of annoying that it's gonna win.
Because I think Scorsese's culture, I think Scorsese's legacy is already set in stone. Like he won't be remembered the way he wants to be remembered right now in his career. Yeah. Like the introspective Scorsese, I don't think it will be remembered.
Yeah.
I think he'll be remembered as like guy who one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, but also very dude bro, which I think like Irishman is like the antithesis of being dude bro, because it just shows like what this toxic masculinity does to you, and to your family and to your life, and you end up dying alone. I
want to clarify.
I just turned to Reverend Toller for a second.
Yeah, I was gonna say, goddamn. Paul Schrader over here now we're talking about.
Paul Schrader, on the other hand, will be remembered forever.
Will be remembered. He is our god. No, I do think though, I am willing to concede that it might not be a modern classic. But I think at some point in time, we have to talk about The Wolf of Wall Street and its impact, because it is a movie that, like, it has like weirdly, like, it is weirdly like been grown with like the grind internet culture or the finance internet culture. You're right. It's so annoying. Like, I'm weirdly like, I like The Wolf of Wall Street more than The Irishman, but I'm weirdly annoyed that I really like The Wolf of Wall Street. I'm gonna be completely honest. I think that movie rules. I'm weirdly annoyed that we can't put in it as a modern classic, The Irishman, but I kind of understand it.
So it's kind of funny that like Paul Schrader and Scorsese, like the what we've come to conclusion is that they both have developed nuances later on in their filmmaking careers that will not be recognized by people. In the future.
Yeah, it sucks because it feels like The Irishman is a movie that has been forgotten weirdly.
Yeah,
like it's not. It doesn't show up on like Netflix homepages. It's a hard movie to market, but it's like, I know we talked about like who was elevated by The Wolf of Wall Street. You can argue like Matthew McConaughey was elevated and partially, but like Leonardo DiCaprio was a guy, but like he like already clearly a guy, but it just like The Wolf of Wall Street was grabbed by the culture or defined the culture. The Irishman didn't. I'm annoyed by that. I changed my vote. You got me. You did it. You had the better arguments, you motherfucker. No, it's not a modern
So I want
classic.
to talk about the next episode.
Yes. So next episode, Halloween, because we're in October. When will this come out? Will the Halloween one come out in time? Yes, I think so. Around there, maybe. So we're doing a Halloween episode. I was just really planning out a schedule in my head. We're gonna talk about a horror movie that came out in 2017 called Get Out. It is arguably the most critically acclaimed movie of the past like 10 years, like bar none. Like nobody has anything bad to say about it. Anybody who sees it,
maybe Critical Drinker.
Yeah. Oh fuck. One day Critical Drinker is gonna be like, who these fucking guys, and we're gonna get overwhelmed by his army of people who don't like us, because we were just two guys. We're doing Get Out, but we're also going to watch kind of like a bunch of other different horror movies in the same time and talk about them and kind of go through them and stuff like that. So we're doing like a Get Out Halloween inspired episode, which is, will be a nice little reprieve after watching a long 3-hour, like very like introspective, kind of sad movie about the Irishman. But Get Out is like $145, Matt. So this is like right up your alley. Perfect for you. Yeah.
Can't wait.
You could watch two Get Outs almost with one Irishman. Well,
I'll probably won't do that, but
Matt,
it's a nice thought.
Any final thoughts before we depart for this episode?
I was gonna say this at the beginning of the video, but like I think Spotify and Apple Podcasts, you can like leave like star ratings, right?
Yeah.
Maybe do that.
Yeah.
Because it boosts us up.
Yeah, help us. Yeah, no, anybody who has already done that, thank you. But yeah, if you want to review us, give us 5 stars and tell us how wrong we are. Like that's okay. Like we're not
give
gonna
us 5 stars, but leave a negative review.
Matt, when we're dead and this is like unearthed and they're just like, you guys got it all wrong. Like every single movie is
I'm
wrong.
okay with that.
I'm okay with that too. Yeah. Yeah. Matt, this was a good talk. Very fascinating movie to dissect and think about. I am now deeply introspective about my own life and my own mortality and my own death. And, got hopefully a long ways to go, but,
I don't think so.
Matt, you're like, I can see it now. 32 gone.
Yeah.
Tragically. Or not tragically. Who knows? Maybe it's like, it's his time.
Maybe hotly anticipated.
Yeah, more like, it's like Tyler died. It's like,
yeah, like, okay.
Yeah, it's fine by me. Yeah. Okay. Matt, I hate ending these things. I'm so awkward with it. Matt, this was fun. Yeah, check us out on Spotify, Apple, really anywhere you can get a podcast, and our YouTube channel, whatever works best. Leave us a comment or rate us or let us know how wrong we are. But yeah, we'll be back with Get Out and some Halloween episodes. There will also be other ones to check out too. So go check out our Iron Man and The Last Jedi, which will be out by the time this goes out, probably. So those are 2 big ones as well. Matt, say your goodbyes.
Hasta la vista.
All right. Bye, guys. Thank you guys for listening, and goodbye.